The space city of Karen Prime never slept. Layers of glowing towers rose into the dark sky, linked by floating walkways and streams of silent traffic. Hundreds of alien species moved through the streets, their voices blending into a low, constant hum. Among them walked a human man named Elias. He kept his head down, his hands in his coat pockets, moving carefully through a place that was never meant for his kind. Humans were tolerated here, nothing more. They were seen as weak, short-lived, and unimportant in the great balance of the galaxy. Elias had learned long ago not to draw attention. On Karen Prime, attention was dangerous. He worked small delivery jobs, carried messages, fixed machines others did not care about. It was not a proud life, but it was a living. That night, he was heading home through the lower market district, where lights flickered and shadows stretched long between the stalls. The air smelled of metal and strange spices. He was already thinking about rest when a sudden movement caught his eye. An alien woman stood near a transport platform, tall and still, her skin marked with faint silver patterns that seemed to shift under the lights. She held a small bag at her side. It was not large, but it glowed softly, as if something inside it was alive. Before Elias could think much about it, two figures rushed past him. They were fast, thin-limbed aliens with sharp movements and nervous energy. One of them grabbed the glowing bag, yanking it from the woman's hand, and both took off into the crowd. The woman did not shout. She did not chase them. She simply turned her head slightly, watching them disappear. Around her, no one reacted. Traders continued selling, travelers continued walking. Theft was common here, and helping was rare. Elias stopped without meaning to. His heart began to pound. He knew the rules. Humans did not interfere. Humans survived by staying invisible. But something felt wrong. He looked at the alien woman again. There was no fear in her posture, no panic in her eyes. Only patience. That unsettled him more than a scream would have. He hesitated, feeling the weight of every warning he had ever heard about this city. Then he saw the thieves turn into a narrow side passage, one he knew well. Before his mind could catch up with his body, Elias started running. The alley was dark and tight, cluttered with pipes and cables. The thieves were fast, but they were not careful. They did not expect pursuit, especially not from a human. Elias pushed himself harder, his boots striking the metal ground loudly. One of the aliens glanced back and laughed when he saw who was chasing them. That laugh turned into surprise when Elias leapt forward, grabbing the strap of the glowing bag. They struggled for a moment. The bag pulsed with light, growing warmer in Elias's hands. Panic flashed across the thieves' faces. Without warning, they let go and bolted deeper into the city, vanishing into the maze of streets. Elias stood there, breathing hard, staring at the bag as if it might explode. He had no idea what it was, only that it felt important and dangerous. For a brief second, he considered dropping it and walking away. No one had seen him. He could still be safe. But he remembered the woman's calm eyes, the way she had not even tried to stop the theft herself. With a quiet sigh, Elias turned and walked back toward the platform. The alien woman was still there, exactly where he had left her. When she saw the bag in his hands, her eyes narrowed slightly, not in surprise but in interest. Elias held it out to her without a word. She accepted it slowly, her fingers brushing his for a fraction of a second. A strange warmth passed between them, like static before a storm. "Why did you do that?" she asked. Her voice was smooth, controlled, and carried an accent Elias could not place. He shrugged, suddenly unsure of himself. "It was yours," he said simply. She studied him in silence. Around them, the city continued as if nothing had happened. After a long moment, she inclined her head. "You chose to act?" she said. "That is uncommon." Elias gave a small, awkward smile, then stepped back. He did not wait for thanks. He did not wait for trouble either. He turned and walked away, unaware that unseen sensors had already locked onto his identity, and that far above the city, powerful minds were reviewing what he had done. He believed the moment was over. He did not know that a single choice, made in a dark alley, had just placed his fate, and the fate of humanity, into the hands of the woman he had helped. Elias walked away from the platform believing the moment was finished, yet the city around him felt different, heavier, as if the air itself was watching him. He moved through the streets with the same careful steps, but his thoughts would not settle. The image of the alien woman stayed in his mind, her calm eyes, her steady voice. Nothing about her matched the fear that most showed in places like Karen Prime. He told himself it meant nothing. Still, he could not shake the feeling that something unseen had shifted behind him. The market lights blurred as he walked, and the distant sound of engines echoed above. Unknown to him, the alien woman remained where she was, watching his retreating form with quiet focus. She was not what she appeared to be, and the bag he returned was never truly stolen. It was beta test, placed in one of the busiest districts of the city to see what kind of being would act without promise of reward. Many had seen the theft, none had moved until the human did, and that single action now echoed far beyond the streets. Elias crossed a bridge into a residential sector, believing himself alone, but he was not. The woman followed at a distance, unseen, moving through the city with effortless control, as if the crowds parted for her without knowing why. She studied him not with curiosity alone, but with judgment. She had watched thousands fail similar tests across the galaxy, warriors, merchants, leaders, all driven by fear or self-interest, yet this human had acted with no power, no protection, and no reason other than a sense of right, and that disturbed the order. She knew. Elias reached a public lift and waited. His reflection stared back at him, tired, uncertain, human. When the doors opened, the woman stepped inside beside him. As if by chance, he stiffened, recognizing her instantly, but she gave no sign that they had met before. The lift began its silent rise through layers of the city, and the space between them felt charged. Finally she spoke, asking him where he was going. Her tone neutral, controlled. Elias answered simply, saying home. She nodded, as if weighing the word home, as if it carried meaning beyond walls and shelter. She asked him why he lived here among those who looked down on his kind. He answered honestly, saying humans adapted because they had to, because survival meant learning when to endure and when to move. She listened closely, asking if endurance ever turned into weakness. He paused before answering, saying no, because choosing kindness in a hard place was not weakness, it was strength that did not need permission. The lift slowed and the doors opened, but the woman did not leave. She asked one final question, what he would have done if the thieves had hurt him. Elias answered without thinking, saying he would still have tried, because some choices mattered more than safety. The doors closed again, and the lift continued upward past his floor. Confusion crossed his face, but before he could speak, the lights dimmed for a brief moment, and when they brightened, the woman was gone. The lift stopped and opened to an empty corridor. Elias stepped out, unsettled, wondering if exhaustion had played tricks on his mind. Far above the city, the woman now stood in a chamber of light and shadow, surrounded by observers hidden behind energy screens, ancient beings who judged entire species with silent votes. She spoke calmly, reporting what she had seen, a human who acted without command, without gain, without fear. The observers reacted with interest, skepticism, and concern. Humans were insignificant by every measurable scale, yet this one carried something rare, a moral gravity that defied logic. The test was meant to confirm weakness, instead it revealed potential. Below, Elias reached his small living space, unaware that his name was already spreading through systems beyond his understanding. Unseen eyes followed his movements, unseen hands adjusted probabilities, and somewhere deep within the great machinery of galactic law, a trial that had not yet been announced was already forming. The woman looked once more at the recorded moment of him returning the bag and allowed herself a single quiet thought. Sometimes the smallest species carried the heaviest choices. Morning light filtered through the upper layers of Karen Prime, casting long pale beams across the narrow living units where Elias slept. He woke with the uneasy feeling that comes before trouble, the kind that tightens the chest before the mind understands why. He sat up slowly, listening to the distant hum of the city traffic. The sounds were familiar, yet something felt wrong, as if the air itself carried tension. He dressed quickly, preparing for another quiet day of work, telling himself the events of the previous night were finished, just a strange encounter, nothing more. But the moment he stepped outside his door, that belief shattered. Security drones hovered at the end of the corridor, their dark shells marked with the symbols of the Galactic Authority. Residents froze in place. No one spoke, no one moved. Elias felt his heart begin to race. He had seen arrests before. They were never gentle, never fair, especially when humans were involved. One of the drones turned its central lens toward him, and a sharp mechanical voice echoed through the corridor, ordering him to remain still. He raised his hands slowly, knowing resistance would only make things worse. Doors around him sealed as neighbors vanished back into their homes, unwilling to be seen. 2 armored officers approached, tall and faceless, their movements precise and cold. They did not explain their reason, they never did. One seized his arm with crushing strength while the other scanned his body and identity. The skin paused, then confirmed a match. Elias was informed that he was under arrest for unauthorized interference in protected galactic proceedings. The words meant nothing to him, yet the tone left no room for questions. He tried to speak, to ask what he had done, but a restraining field locked around his wrists and silenced him instantly. As they escorted him through the corridors, Elias caught glimpses of others watching through narrow door slits, fear written across alien faces. Some looked away, others watched with distant curiosity. None offered help. Humans learned early that injustice here was normal. The transport platform waited outside, its surface humming with energy. He was forced inside, and the doors sealed before he could take one last look at the city he had struggled to survive in. The platform lifted smoothly, carrying him upward, away from everything familiar. The journey felt endless, time lost meaning as the craft passed through restricted layers of the city and into controlled space. Elias tried to calm his breathing, reminding himself that panic solved nothing, but his thoughts raced back to the stolen bag, the woman, her questions, the strange feeling that followed him since that night. Could this be connected? The idea seemed impossible, yet nothing else made sense. He had lived quietly, obeyed rules, avoided conflict, and still he was being taken. The platform finally slowed and descended into a vast structure of cold metal and light, the Hall of Judgment. Though Elias did not know its name, guards led him through towering gates into a chamber so large it swallowed sound. Rows of elevated seats curved around the room, occupied by figures cloaked in shadow. This was not a place for individuals, it was a place where decisions reshaped lives, civilizations, futures. Elias was placed at the center, alone, unarmed, unimportant, his restraints released only enough to let him stand. An unseen voice announced the beginning of preliminary review, stating that the subject had engaged in an unauthorized moral deviation within a monitored test environment. The words struck him harder than any blow. A test environment. He finally understood that nothing from that night had been random. His small act had been seen, measured, judged. Whispers spread through the chamber, some voices dismissive, others curious. Humans were rarely brought here, they were beneath notice, and yet here he stood. The voice continued, stating that the subject would remain in custody until a formal trial could be convened. The final authority had not yet arrived. At the mention of the final authority, the room fell silent, even the guards stiffened. Elias lifted his head, scanning the shadows, searching for the woman, but she was not there. A cold realization settled in his chest. He had been tested without knowing, and now he would be judged without understanding. He stood alone in the heart of galactic power, accused not of crime but of choice. Far above the chamber, beyond sight, the alien woman watched the proceedings, her expression unreadable. She had not intervened, she could not yet. The test was complete, but the consequences were only beginning, and the human who believed kindness was simple would soon learn its true cost. The chamber changed when the trial began. Light shifted across the vast hall as ancient systems awakened. Elias felt it before he heard it, a deep vibration passing through the floor and into his bones. The shadows that hid the observers pulled back, revealing shapes, forms, and colors beyond anything he had known. Towering beings of crystal-scaled figures wrapped in energy clouds, minds housed in machines older than stars. This was not a court built for fairness, it was built for authority, and Elias stood at its center, smaller than ever. A voice echoed not from one place but from everywhere, announcing the formal opening of judgment against the human species. Representative Elias of Earth. The words struck him with confusion and fear. Representative. He had not come here by choice. He was no leader, no symbol, just a man who had returned a stolen bag. Yet every gaze in the room settled on him with sudden weight. He realized then that he was no longer being judged as an individual but as an example. Images appeared in the air around him, replaying the moment in the market, the theft, the chase, the return of the bag. Slowed, examined from countless angles. Voices murmured, reactions ranged from amusement to disbelief. Some questioned why a human would risk harm for an alien, others suggested foolishness disguised as virtue. One towering judge spoke, declaring that the act violated non-interference norms. Another countered that the test allowed observation without restriction. Elias wanted to speak, to explain, but no one had asked for his voice yet. Then the questions began, not directed at him, but about him. What motivates a species that lacks strength, longevity, and influence? Why would such beings act against self-interest? What value could that behavior bring to galactic order? Elias listened, feeling as though he were not present, like a specimen pinned under glass. He clenched his fists, holding on to his calm, reminding himself that fear would only confirm their assumptions. At last a signal rippled through the chamber. The observers fell silent, and the guards straightened. The final authority was arriving. Elias sensed it before he saw her, a familiar presence, calm, controlled, undeniable. The central platform descended slowly, and there she stood, the alien woman from the market, no longer dressed as a traveler but as something far greater, her form radiant with restrained power, symbols of judgment glowing along her skin. Realization hit Elias with crushing force, his breath caught as memory and truth collided. She took her seat at the highest position, and the court bowed, not in ceremony but in instinct. Elias understood then that she was not simply a judge, she was the judge, the one whose decision overruled all others, the one who had watched him without revealing herself, the woman he had helped without knowing why. Her gaze met his, and for a moment the noise of the chamber faded. There was no anger in her expression, no gratitude, only focus. She addressed the court, stating that the test placed in the city was designed to measure instinctual morality in uncontrolled environments. The results across cycles had been consistent. Advanced species prioritized power, security, and gain. Weaker species avoided risk entirely. The human response, she explained, was an anomaly. Murmurs spread again, louder this time. Some judges questioned the validity of a single subject, others argued that anomalies were dangerous, that unpredictability threatened order. Elias felt their words pressing down on him, threatening to crush him beneath their logic. Yet the woman raised a hand and silence returned. She spoke of choice not as weakness but as direction, stating that a being who acts without command reveals its core values more clearly than one who follows rules. She reminded them that every dominant civilization once stood where humans now stood, insignificant until tested. She turned then to Elias, addressing him directly for the first time, asking why he did not walk away when he had every reason to. He swallowed and answered honestly, saying because someone needed help and he was there. No strategy, no hope of reward, just that simple truth. The chamber reacted. Some scoffed, others watched intently. The woman leaned back, considering his words, and Elias sensed the balance shifting, not toward mercy but toward consequence. Whatever decision came next would ripple outward, beyond him, beyond earth, beyond this court. He had not sought importance, yet it had found him. As the court recessed to deliberate, Elias remained standing alone under the vast lights, knowing that the woman who once asked him quiet questions now held the fate of his species in her hands, and that the trial was far from over. The chamber felt different after the recess, as if the air itself carried weight. Elias remained standing at the center alone beneath the towering lights, his thoughts slow and heavy. He understood now that silence here was never empty, it was filled with judgment, unseen calculations and decisions that could not be undone. He kept his eyes forward, steady, not because he felt brave but because there was nowhere else to look. When the judges returned, their presence pressed down like gravity, ancient minds focused on a single human among countless stars. The woman rose from her seat and stepped forward, every movement controlled, deliberate, power restrained rather than displayed. She spoke, and the chamber listened, not out of fear alone but respect. She revealed that the bag was not valuable by material standards. It held no weapon, no data, no technology that could shift balance. It was designed to attract theft, nothing more. She explained that the test had been repeated across worlds and species for centuries, always with the same result. Those with power ignored injustice, those without avoided danger. Survival ruled, choice was shaped by fear. Yet the human response had broken the pattern, not because he succeeded but because he acted without calculation. He did not weigh odds or gain, he moved because something inside him demanded it. The judges reacted, some in disbelief, others in quiet concern. Elias listened, absorbing the truth that his small decision had been measured against the behavior of entire civilizations. He felt no pride, only a strange sadness that such a simple act was so rare. The woman continued, stating that humanity had long been dismissed as insignificant due to physical limits, short lifespans, and lack of expansion, but significance, she argued, was not defined by scale but by direction. She turned toward Elias again, asking him if he believed his choice had been special. He answered quietly, saying no, it felt normal. He said many humans would have done the same if they believed they could make a difference. The chamber stirred at that. Some judges challenged the claim, arguing that history showed humanity capable of cruelty, as well as kindness. The woman did not deny it. She acknowledged that humans were flawed, contradictory, and unpredictable, yet that unpredictability, she argued, was precisely their strength. She spoke of species that had perfected logic and efficiency only to lose empathy, of empires that valued order so highly they erased compassion in pursuit of stability. She stated that humanity balanced between light and darkness, choosing each day which path to follow, and that ability to choose again and again was rare, precious, and dangerous. The deliberation that followed was intense. Though Elias could not hear every exchange, he felt the tension rise, fall, and shift like unseen tides. Some judges demanded punishment, fearing precedent. Others argued for observation, restraint, delay. The woman listened to all, then raised her hand, ending debate. She announced that the revelation was complete. The test had achieved its purpose. Humanity had revealed something the galaxy lacked: moral momentum, a capacity to act without command. She stated that such a trait could not be ignored, nor could it be controlled easily, and that frightened many. Elias felt the weight of her words settle around him. He realized then that the danger was not condemnation but attention. Humanity had been invisible, safe in obscurity. Now that shield was gone, the woman declared that judgment would not be punishment nor reward but recognition. Humanity would no longer be classified as a minor, undeveloped species. They would be acknowledged as emerging moral agents within the galactic community. The chamber reacted with shock. Some judges rose, others withdrew into silence. Elias struggled to understand the scale of what was being said. Recognition meant responsibility, exposure, expectation. It meant humanity would be watched, tested, challenged, no longer overlooked. The woman met his eyes one last time and said that a single act does not define a species, but it can reveal its direction. She said humanity had taken a step forward without knowing the ground beneath it, and now the galaxy would respond. As the chamber dimmed and systems powered down, Elias remained still, aware that the trial had not truly ended. It had only changed form. The revelation was complete, but its consequences were just beginning. The announcement spread beyond the chamber faster than Elias could imagine, rippling through data streams, councils, and fleets across known space. Humanity's status shifted in a single moment, from overlooked to observed, from irrelevant to discussed. Elias was escorted from the court, not as a prisoner, yet not as a free man either. He walked through halls lined with silent guards, their posture respectful but distant, as if unsure how to treat someone who stood at the center of such change. He was given a private chamber overlooking the stars, a place meant for reflection or containment. He could not tell which. From the wide viewport he watched distant lights drift slowly, each one a world, a civilization, a judgment waiting to be made. He felt smaller than ever, not because of fear but because of responsibility. He had not asked to speak for humanity, yet his actions had done so without permission. Elsewhere, emergency councils formed, ancient alliances debated the implications of the ruling. Some species argued that recognition would lead humans to overreach, others feared the opposite, that ignoring them now would be dangerous. The idea that a physically weak species could influence the moral direction of the galaxy unsettled those who ruled through strength. The judge addressed the high conclave in closed session, stating that humanity would be monitored, not controlled. She insisted that forced guidance would corrupt the very trait that made them valuable. Choice. She warned that attempts to dominate or exploit humans would be met with response not from her alone but from the court itself. Her words carried weight even among those who disagreed. Elias was summoned again, not to stand trial but to listen. He was informed that his actions had placed him under permanent observation, a liaison between humanity and the galactic court. He felt the pressure of that role settle upon him, a bridge built from an unplanned act. He asked what would happen to Earth, and was told that no immediate contact would be made. Humanity would be allowed to continue unaware for a time, to grow naturally without influence. The judge believed that premature exposure could fracture them. He questioned whether that was fair. She answered that fairness was not the goal, preservation was. Humanity would be tested again, not through traps but through consequence. Their future actions would shape how the galaxy responded. Trade, protection, conflict, alliance, all would depend on choices yet to be made. As days passed, Elias remained in the station, watched yet untouched. He learned that some factions already opposed the ruling, seeking to provoke incidents to prove humans unstable. Others sought to quietly recruit human talent for their own gain. Unseen currents formed around a species that had never noticed the tide. The judge visited Elias one final time before he was returned to his world. She stood beside him at the viewport, stars reflected in her eyes. She told him that judgment was not an end but a burden, and that humanity would soon learn how heavy recognition could be. He asked her why she had chosen him. She answered that she had not. He had chosen himself the moment he stepped into that alley. When his transport was prepared, she gave him no speech, no praise, only a quiet reminder that every choice mattered more now than ever. Elias returned to Karen Prime, then to Earth, carrying nothing but memory. He resumed his life outwardly unchanged, yet he felt the invisible weight of watchful eyes. Back on Earth, life continued unaware of the shift. Farmers worked, children learned, machines hummed, cities slept and woke as they always had. Yet somewhere deep in the fabric of galactic power, humanity had been placed on a new path. Elias understood that the judgment was not about law or status, it was about expectation. Humanity had been seen, and once seen could never be unseen. The galaxy waited not to see what humans could build or destroy, but to see what they would choose next. Elias returned to Earth without ceremony, without announcement, and without proof of where he had been. The world he stepped back into looked the same: blue skies, crowded cities, ordinary noise. Yet he felt the difference deep inside him. Humanity had crossed a line without knowing, and there was no turning back. He walked through familiar streets, aware that unseen systems now measured choices made by people who believed themselves alone. Life continued as it always had. Nations argued, borders shifted, technology advanced slowly and unevenly, but subtle changes began to appear. Humans made small decisions, acts of courage, kindness, resistance, that seemed unconnected yet together formed a pattern. The galaxy watched quietly, waiting to see if the anomaly would fade or grow. Far beyond Earth, the court observed, not with judgment but patience. The judge, who had once stood as an alien woman in a crowded market, now watched entire worlds with the same calm focus. She had seen species rise and fall through conquest, through logic, through fear, but humanity was different, not better, not purer, simply unpredictable, and that uncertainty carried power. Elias spoke to no one of what he knew. He understood that revelation would shatter more than it saved. Humanity needed time to remain human, to struggle, fail, learn, and choose without the weight of stars pressing down. He returned to his quiet work, his simple routines, yet every action carried meaning. Even silence was now a form of choice. In distant systems, factions debated whether to interfere. Some feared humans would destabilize balance, others believed they would restore something long lost: compassion without command, courage without promise. The court held firm: no direct contact, no manipulation. Humanity would define itself. Years passed unnoticed by most but watched by many. Human ships began to explore a little further. Diplomats spoke with unexpected honesty. Soldiers hesitated before pulling triggers. Scientists shared knowledge rather than hoarding it, not always, not everywhere, but often enough to be noticed. The judge observed a small human colony offering aid to an alien world without demand. She observed a human captain choosing evacuation over victory. She observed humans failing too: greed, fear, violence still present, reminding her that humanity was not ideal but real, and that reality mattered. Elias aged as humans do, quietly, visibly, his role never spoken yet never ended. Sometimes he felt the weight of it all, sometimes he felt nothing at all, but he never regretted the choice he made in that alley. He understood now that humanity's greatest strength was not power or unity, but the ability to choose again after failure. One day far in the future, when humanity finally looked beyond its sky and found the galaxy looking back, the meeting would not be one of conquest or submission but recognition, both sides changed by the waiting. The judge prepared for that day, knowing that when humans stepped onto the galactic stage, they would not arrive as conquerors or servants, but as something rare, a species defined not by what it was but by what it chose to be. And in a universe ruled by power, that choice would change everything.